As a human, I try to avoid Washington, D.C. as frequently as possible. There are nice buildings there. The problem is it's filled with government. And it turns out that government is filled with idiots. And so yesterday we did a congressional hearing. The hearing was in the House Judiciary Committee. And it was about issues surrounding a collusive quasi-conspiratorial group called GARM, the Global Alliance for Responsible Media. That group is essentially a consortium of 90% of the advertising market. They sign up with GARM. GARM sets a pseudo-objective standard for what can be advertised on and what cannot be advertised on. That pseudo-objective standard, of course, cuts universally against conservatives. So what they do is they label unsafe sites like the Daily Wire or shows like mine or shows like Joe Rogan or places like X. This is one of their goals. They try to cudgel all of these social media sites or shows or conservative outlets into compliance with their idea of things that ought to be said. So I was on the Hill testifying about all of that. Here is some of my opening statement. We're in the midst of a trust crisis in the world of media, which is because so many in the legacy media have lied in order to preserve left-leaning narratives. To take just the most recent example, we were told by the legacy media that President Biden was just fine. For years, anyone who questioned his health and mental fitness was trafficking in cheap fakes. And then President Biden went out and engaged in a full-scale mental collapse on stage in front of hundreds of millions of people. So we can see why Americans, at least Americans who are not Democrats, do not trust the media. The question isn't really why the legacy media have lost Americans' trust. We know that answer. The question is why, despite that loss of trust, the legacy media continue to gain share in the advertising market. And the answer is simple. There is, in fact, an informal pressure system created by Democratic legislators, this White House, legacy media, advertisers, and pseudo-objective brand safety organizations. That system guarantees that advertising dollars flow only to left-wing media brands. And so the hearing was fairly long. It started about 10 a.m. It ended about 2:30 p.m., somewhere in that neighborhood. It was a little spicy. There were some Democrats who decided that they were not going to talk about the issue at hand, namely the collusive attempt by advertising agencies, social media bros, and government. Right? Because, again, Democrats have been pushing for intervention in these markets for years. And so what happens is that advertisers and social media bros, in an attempt to avoid the scrutiny of people like Dianne Feinstein, who has been consistently threatening, until her death, obviously, she was consistently threatening social media for years with regulation if they would not, quote unquote, regulate themselves. She's not the only one. There are members of the committee before whom I was speaking. People like ranking member Jerry Nadler, people like head of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Pramila Jayapal, who have openly called for regulation of social media if social media allows messages they don't like. They call it misinformation or hate speech, but it really is just messages they don't like. So instead of talking about all that, some of the Congress people decided that it would be fun to talk about other things. One of the things they kept saying over and over and over was Project 2025. You might think you're getting everything your body needs from that green juice you've been drinking every morning. You're not. Most people still fall short of the essential nutrients their bodies need to function at their very best. My good friend and colleague Christine, who's a triathlete, she also happens to be a mom to a toddler, she's been taking momentous creatine, omega-3, and protein daily to cover all her bases. She is thrilled with the results. These 3 supplements support nearly every aspect of foundational health, from aiding cognitive function, Joe, to reducing muscle and joint inflammation. Momentous is dedicated to working with only the best experts in business and to using the highest quality ingredients. What's on the label? That's what's in the product. Absolutely nothing else is in there. Momentous also heavily invests in third-party testing, holding their products to the standard set by the most demanding organizations in the world, including the NFL and the NBA. There's a reason why the world's best athletes and experts use and help develop Momentous products. If you're like Christine, you want to take supplements that are made by and used by the best in the world, head on over to livemomentous.com/Shapiro or use code Shapiro for 20% off. livemomentous.com/Shapiro. That's livemomentous.com/Shapiro. The Democrats have been trying for the last week or so to try to misdirect away from the fact that their president is no longer sentient by shouting Project 2025. So, for example, Joe Biden just the other day tweeted out Google Project 2025. Naturally, a lot of people then did Google Project 2025. So yesterday at the hearing, I'd say half the Democrats in the House Judiciary Committee decided to rail about Project 2025, which has literally nothing to do with the subject of this particular committee hearing. One of the people who was doing that was Representative Eric Swalwell, who I think just kind of wanted to have a Twitter battle, but in real life. So we had a bit of a colorful exchange, the representative and I. Here is what that sounded like.
Mr. Shapiro, thank you for joining us today. I think it is important that you're here as one of the leading conservative voices in the country. And the country has, in the last couple of weeks, talked a lot about and Googled Project 2025. It's one of the most Googled search terms right now. And you're not going to get any censorship from me. So I just wanted to know, from your perspective, I think it would help us understand, on just like a scale of 0 to 100%, how much do you support Project 2025?
I think, like President Trump, I haven't looked all that deeply at Project 2025, but it seems that Democrats on this committee, sort of like Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, if they say Project 2025 enough, their presidential candidate becomes alive again.
So obviously everybody in the room knew what I was saying was true, including Swalwell, who to his credit laughs, because the reality, of course, is that you had Representative Hank Johnson. He came in and he just said Project 2025 over and over and over and over. You had other members of Congress. You had Mary Gay Scanlon from state of Pennsylvania. She also was just referencing Project 2025 over and over and over. So they all know that what I'm saying is true, that this is an attempt to breathe life back into a failing candidacy. And, even Swalwell had to laugh at it because, again, true. But then Swalwell decided that he was just going to make his entire 5-minute questioning time about Project 2025, which, I'll be honest with you, I haven't read. And the reason I haven't read it is because it's 922 pages. I promise you, Eric Swalwell has also not read Project 2025. Probably no one who's criticizing Project 2025 has read Project 2025. Certainly President Trump has not read Project 2025. So, Swalwell is questioning me about this. And what he's really questioning me about, I assume, is just being a conservative. And the idea is that being a conservative is just evil. I don't think it went particularly well for Representative Swalwell here.
You probably want less bureaucracy, right?
I do.
I want less bureaucracy. You want more efficiency.
I do.
I want more efficiency. You want taxpayer money spent wisely.
I do. Congrats on becoming a Republican.
Yeah. Yeah. My parents would be proud. Mass deportations, it calls for that. Do you support that part?
I support the deportation of any illegal immigrant who's in the United States who is not of benefit to the generalized American public.
So if they're picking agriculture that puts food on the tables of everyday Americans, they've never committed a crime inside the United States, they didn't come across with documents, should they be deported?
If they have not paid taxes and if their draw on the taxpayer benefits are larger than the contribution they are making to the economy, or if they're involved in criminal activity, they should be deported.
How do we measure that?
The same way that the IRS measures my income every year. It seems like if the IRS can track down every aspect of every receipt that I've ever submitted, and they can do so for hundreds of millions of other Americans, they can do that for illegal immigrants as well, except for the fact that no one knows how many are in the country thanks to this administration.
So you would be cool with creating a system where they could pay those taxes if they wanted to and then stay and work and put food on our table?
It depends on how long it would take for them to pay the taxes, and they would also have to go presumably to the back of the line, although I'm not sure why I'm testifying about immigration policy at this point.
How about banning the abortion pill? That's part of Project 2025. Do you support that part?
I think that that's a state-by-state issue on a personal level. I'm
just asking you.
Sure, I'm a fully pro-life person, which means that I'm not in favor of the distribution of the abortion pill.
Banning same-sex marriage, what about that part?
I am in favor of traditional marriage between a man and a woman, and I'm perfectly fine with anyone having any sort of voluntary sexual arrangement they seek. That's a different thing from whether the government should attach benefits to that personal relationship.
But you think it's a sin to have same-sex marriage?
I mean, I'm confused. Are you asking me as a religious Jew what I think about biblically?
I'm just asking, is it a sin to be gay?
Is it a sin to be gay? I mean, how long do we have here? 2 minutes? I mean, if the basic idea is that sexual orientation is up for government regulation, I'm not in favor of the government regulating the private consenting sexual activity of adults. That is a different thing, once again, from whether the government ought to engage in actual benefits for particular sexual arrangements that adults make.
But again, just you to me, is it a sin or not?
From a religious Jewish perspective, orientation is not a sin, but activity is. That's also the same perspective of most major religions, so far as I'm aware.
Okay. And how about cutting Social Security? Do you support that part of 2025?
I'm not sure what Project 2025's position on Social Security is. I'm in favor of the restructuring of Social Security along the lines of privatization and lowering and increasing the retirement age, because you, as well as every other congressperson, knows Social Security is going to go bankrupt, and yet everyone seems to have an interest in lying about it for the next decade and a half until we have to take austerity measures or radically increase inflation or taxes.
And bans against books about slavery. Do you support that part about?
Why would I possibly be in favor of bans about books about slavery? That would be absolutely ridiculous. What I am in favor of is the idea that school libraries should be able to make decisions along the lines of what exactly is appropriate for, say, a 7th grader and whether they ought to be treated to cartoons and genderqueer. That's not quite the same thing.
And just because we found some receipts, you did say, I think homosexual activity is a sin.
Yes, I'm a religious Jew,
I'm
that's
sure
true.
there's a genetic component.
You found me out.
Orientation, but the view of all religious people I know has always been that sexual behavior is something that is up to you. And you said, I may have a desire to sleep with many women, but I do not.
I agree with me. Yes, that's true.
Congratulations on your, I'm sure it's very hard to restrain yourself. Mr. Chairman, I just want to shift to Alvin Bragg. He was supposed to be here this week.
And then he starts randomly talking about Alvin Bragg and the hearings. I would have jumped in at this point and said that Eric Swalwell is probably the last person in America who should talk about the difficulty of struggling with, for example, men as a genetic matter wanting to sleep with many women. Eric Swalwell's personal history is quite checkered. I decided not to bring that up in the congressional hearing. But again, it just shows you what Democrats are trying to do. Do they actually want to talk about the issues that are on the table? Of course not. What they actually want to do is misdirect to a bunch of issues they don't fully understand. And how many questions can you be asked by a congressperson where the premise is just completely wrong? So, didn't go amazing for Representative Swalwell, and we hope he gets well soon. In any case, back to the topic of the actual hearing. One of the things that became clear from the House Judiciary Committee report is that the Global Alliance on Responsible Media didn't just target the Daily Wire, which they suggested was well out of bounds for advertisers, or Joe Rogan. They also targeted Twitter/X. The report said that GARM tried to direct all of its members, corporate giants who together account for 90% of global advertising dollars, to, quote, stop all paid advertisement on the platform after Elon Musk purchased it. And we have the emails. Rob Rakowitz, who is the head of GARM, he was emailed by one of the advertisers or one of the advertising agencies, says, "Hi, Rob, I'm reaching out to ask you if it's possible to arrange a meeting and hear more about your perspectives about the Twitter situation and a possible boycott from many companies." And Rakowitz then responded, quote, "Hi, both. This is good. I did some tweaking on the edges to help contextualize who we are and what we are doing. I'd like to point out that nowhere in this email is the, you may recognize my name from being the idiot who challenged Musk on brand safety issues. Since then, they are 80% below revenue forecasts. Happy face emoji." This prompted Elon Musk to announce today that X has no choice but to file suit against the perpetrators and collaborators in the advertising boycott racket. Hopefully some states will consider criminal prosecution. So, some actual positive effects from a congressional hearing other than some viral moments. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.